Welcome back to the Music Bar Podcast, and today is episode 51. Thank you for joining me today. So today I'm going to be discussing Van Halen. Not surprised, I guess you'd probably say, but there's been a debate that's been going on for a very long time, which I'll get to in a moment. But let's start with the beginning. I first got into Van Halen when I first saw Live Without a Net, and Sammy Hagar was the lead singer back then on 5150. So emotionally for me, visually, I first saw Van Halen with Sammy Hagar. And I hadn't realised at the time, until I started buying magazines and researching Van Halen, that there was a whole other era before that with Dudley Roth. And I didn't know that I had been listening to Dudley Roth that era without knowing it, because my stepbrothers would have their albums downstairs in their bedroom. They would play on volume 10, and I would hear Running with the Devil, I would hear Eruption, I would hear Hot for the Teacher, Jump, Panama, Unchained, and not know who they were because I couldn't go into their room. I wasn't allowed to. Otherwise, I'll get hit. So after I discovered Van Halen 5150, I realised that I'd missed 6 albums of Van Halen with Dudley Roth. And I asked my stepbrothers to record it onto a vinyl for me, onto a cassette for me, and they did. So here I am with one Sammy Hagar album and 6 great albums from Dudley Roth. But emotionally, I was already attached to what I saw and what I heard, especially when Eddie Van Halen did the solo. Now, you have to understand too, I was listening to Judas Priest that my brothers would be playing, and I'd see sometimes an album cover here and there or whatever, and they were wearing leather and that kind of thing. Iron Maiden's the same. But Van Halen were on stage wearing happy pants and tank tops and bright colours, which was so strange. But what a great look, and they looked like they were having a party on stage. So that was what I was drawn to originally. So I had to go back and listen to this heavier kind of music, and that's why today the debate is about which era is better. Is it the Sammy Hagar or Dudley Roth? So each singer obviously brought their own personalities to the table, obviously, and you can't get much bigger personality than Mr. Roth. He would bring things to the stage that you'd never seen before, these high jumps and kicks and martial art moves. He was such a personality that no one had ever seen it before, really. And he made girls swoon, and the guys were jealous. And he was just this great performer, which to me is still one of the best, if not the greatest performer, frontman ever. And he could sing, but he couldn't sing as well as what Sammy could. But he was great at what he did with what he had. And he did a lot of spoken word in his songs as well, so he'd talk a little bit here and there. But overall, you wouldn't have Van Halen without Dudley Roth. On the other hand, you got this great singer, Sammy Hagar, and he was a great composer and a songwriter. He'd been in other bands before and had a pretty good solo career, but his songwriting was amazing. So when he discovered, when he got together with Eddie, they wrote some great tunes, probably some better songs than what were on the original 6, music-wise and songwriting-wise. But catchy, probably not as catchy, probably more poppy in some ways. So, how do you decide who's the best? Well, it doesn't really matter who's the best, it's who you like the most. And I like both. I think both are amazing, and I'm going to have to go through something like album sales to give you an understanding of how you can probably work out who's the greater era. So let's look at the album sales here. Now, album sales is obviously in the blue. And you'll see that Van Halen, the first column, and then the 984, they're very close to 15 million each. That's pretty insane that the first and last were that high, but the ones in between were a lot lower. And then you have 8 million here with the first one with Sammy Hagar, 5150, which is pretty amazing in itself. It comes out with a new singer and did pretty well. But if you go get all these sales here from the 4 and put them on top of these 4, you're pretty close to the same. But then you've still got Van Halen sales of the first album and 1984 sales, so really outweigh. The album sales definitely goes into a tick for David Lee Roth. To break it down a little bit more, this I found quite interesting as well. How they used to record, this came out in 1978. And then they recorded 79, 80, 81, 82, 84. 6 albums in 8 years. Pretty crazy. Metallica don't do that anymore. They haven't done that in a long time. They take 6 or so years to record. So that's pretty phenomenal. And if you look at the sales, you can see 15 million was nearly 16 here, and nearly 9 there. But they did drop off for both eras pretty quickly. And then A Different Kind of Truth, which is the last one they released with David Lee Roth, didn't even make 1 million. So again, I'm always just fascinated by the fact that they record so quick. And don't forget, in 1978 they went out on tour. After that album, they released Van Halen 2. That album went on tour. They went on tour every time, which is pretty phenomenal, which I'll get to later on. You look at the sales over here of streaming. This day and age, with Spotify and with YouTube and etc., 1984 Jump has the most listens. So that kind of tells you straight away that the era of Roth has really set itself in concrete. You know what I mean? It's in stone. It is the greatest. And you got 1984 Jump, Panama, Running with the Devil as well, Hot for Teacher. I ain't talking about Love Eruption. Eruption's a single. Wasn't even a single. It's a solo only, goes for 1:30, and that's up there as well. It's pretty amazing. You Really Got Me, which was a cover. So those all come from the era of Roth. Then you have Why Can't This Be Love and Can't Stop Loving You from Sammy Hagar. Mind you, come down here, you got When It's Love and Love Walks In. So, and Right Now. But 4 songs out of the 5 are love songs, which is kind of amusing, from the era of Hagar. But that's pretty amazing, the Jump. And Jump is their biggest selling song ever. But to have that many off the original albums, like the first and the 6th, is pretty phenomenal for Van Halen Roth era. Yeah, pretty good. Go back to this one here. So, like I said, 1978 they toured, and I just want to tell you, apart from album sales, because obviously David Lee Roth era wins that hands down, and they have had more time to sell too. You know, they've been around a lot longer than the Sammy Hagar era. But in 1978 they went on tour. They called it the World Tour. They played 174 shows across USA, Canada, Europe, and Japan. It took 10 months. So they released Van Halen, went on tour for 10 months, came back, and in 1979 they recorded and then released Van Halen 2 and went out on tour again. This time it was called the World Vacation Tour. And they played 108 shows across USA, Canada, Europe, and Japan. Then, back in the studio. Wish this happened more often with other bands I like now. Metallica, I'm saying. So, 1980 comes out. Women and Children First. They go out on the Invasion Tour. And they do 124 shows. They play USA, Canada, Europe. First time ever in Puerto Rico. And this is the very first time that they've actually got keyboards introduced onto their album as well. And then they go away, tour, come back, record Fair Warning, 1981. They go out on tour. Fair Warning Tour, 81 shows. And this time, they only play Canada and the USA. And that was actually quite a low selling album. So maybe that's one of the reasons why they didn't go to Europe or Japan. Because obviously cost. They probably wouldn't have made their money back. But then they released Diver Down. And they went on tour. And the tour is called Hide Your Sheep Tour. They played 97 shows. This is the first time they ever go to South America, where they play 15 shows. And again, across USA, and Canada. Then they go back home again and record after 3 years, I believe. Yep, 2 years. They record 1984. They go out and do the 1984 tour, 101 shows, Canada, USA, and Europe, and that's also when they did 5 shows over in Europe on the Monsters of Rock tour, which was huge back then. And then, so they've been playing a lot. They go out after every album, and they recorded albums quickly. Okay, you got that whole era is finished. It's now time for 50 or 50, and Sammy Hagar comes out. They go on tour. Live Without a Net is recorded during this tour. They do 111 shows, USA, Canada only, which is quite phenomenal. Then they go and record OU812. So 2 years later, 76 shows. They play Monsters of Rock this time, but in the USA, along with Metallica, Scorpions, Dokken, and Kingdom Come. They also do 9 shows in Japan. So they do 23 Monsters of Rock shows in the USA. That's pretty cool too. Then they go and do 1991. They released For Unlawful Kind of Knowledge, and they called it the Fuck Tour. If you abbreviate For Unlawful Kind of Knowledge, that's what you get. 99 shows. They play Canada 7 times, Mexico 2, Hawaii 3. They have, in September, they played 2 shows in California, which reached 40,000 people. So 20,000 each show. That's pretty amazing. And Alice in Chains is the opening act for this whole tour. So that's pretty good. Because who wouldn't want to go see Alice in Chains back then with the original singer, Lane? All the keyboard parts, I only found this out myself when I was researching this, all the keyboard parts for this tour were not done by Edward Van Halen. And they were not done by him pre-recorded. They actually had a guy called Alan Fitzgerald, who was a keyboard player from Night Ranger, playing keyboards live, but behind the scenes. And he did that again on the Right Here, Right Now tour, and also Balance, which kind of blew me away. So that was pretty funny to kind of like work out. So after the For Unlawful Kind of Knowledge, they went and recorded Right Here, Right Now, the live album, and they actually toured on the live album. So they released it and went on tour, and they did 60 shows all up across Europe, Canada, and USA, which, again, like I said, the keyboards were done by Alan Fitzgerald behind the scenes. And then you've got Balance, which is one of my favourite albums of theirs as well, some of the greatest guitar playing ever. Balance Tour, Edward Van Halen renamed it. I don't think they didn't make any t-shirts or any merchandise for it, but he would call it the Ambulance Tour instead of Balance, because Ed had finally hurt his hip and he couldn't move as well as he used to, do his jumps. And if you watch any video clips from this time, you'll see Alex Van Halen, the drummer, he has a neck brace on because he actually ruptured 3 vertebrae, but still played for the whole tour. They did 135 shows for this tour. Europe was 28, Canada was 7, Japan was 7. And they actually played, which is kind of funny. They opened for Bon Jovi for a few shows in Europe. Bon Jovi was one of the biggest things at the time, and they went and opened for haven't opened for anyone for years, like a decade, but decided because of Bon Jovi they went and opened for Bon Jovi in Europe. But when they toured America and Canada and Japan, they opened up with Collective Soul Skid Row. No, that was only in the North American tour. when it came to ticket sales, apart from album sales, to show you kind of like what who has the greatest era, you kind of got to think, okay, well, what about the sales of tickets? And I could not find any information about which tours had the biggest amount of sales. But overall, as a bit of a information for you guys, from 1980 onwards, Van Halen grossed $324 million with 8.6 million tickets sold. And that was 652 concerts. This is only the ones that are recorded. They do believe there are other ones which were missed, and that's not counting the first two albums, 78 and 79. But yeah, 324 million they grossed. No wonder they can do what they want to do. But yeah, there's no breakdown of era from David Roth or from Sammy Hagar. I couldn't find it, so that's just bit of information that you can hear extra. But it's pretty remarkable that they have done so well for so long with two singers. They did have a whole different singer, Gary Cherone, for one album. That sold less than 1 million, I believe, from what I read before. And then they came out again with David Roth and toured twice with him. And obviously those sales are part of that grossing sales there from 1980. But so, who is the greatest? Well, if you go by sales on albums, it's definitely David Roth. But for me personally, I like both. I always have done. I find their music changed with Sammy Hagar. And even though I heard that first, the guitar playing, the drumming, the bass player, the singing, the background vocals, it's always been great. It's just a different style, I guess, of song. And I love both. And I don't know what you like, if you have a preference to one or the other. Like I said, you can't have Van Halen and Sammy Hagar without Roth. So thanks to both of them, if you ask me. And with those three behind those singers, doing the music and writing the music, I think we're all very, very lucky to have that for as long as we did. And great gratitude to the whole band, because they're phenomenal players, musicians, songwriters. And I'm going to give it a draw. I'm going to sit on the fence, because I found both eras phenomenal. Anyway, thank you for watching. Just please like and subscribe. And comment below. Let me know what you think about who you think is the best era, if you do have a favourite. And I have no problems debating that. I can't argue with people's emotions and their own opinions. I'm not here to change people, but what a great band. And we all love them both, some, but Van Halen, they're the greatest. So yeah, thank you for watching, and rock on.